I want to talk this morning about leadership. And I want to start by showing a speech of moral clarity from a Conservative leader, Margaret Thatcher, speaking about the issue which again raised its head in Australia this week, sending back illegal immigrants to their country of origin.
Those who are illegal immigrants will be returned, and it is customary international law for countries to receive their own immigrants back into their country. And if the right honourable gentleman is suggesting that we ever get to a position when you cannot return illegal immigrants to their country of origin, then he is proposing international chaos.
Precisely. International chaos. Well said, Margaret Thatcher. International chaos is precisely what we are witnessing after decades of weak leadership from all sides of politics. Illegal immigrants pouring out of Africa and into Europe, illegal immigrants pouring in across the US southern border and, of course, into Great Britain and Northern European countries, creating massive social unrest. And the issue popped up here again last week with the Albanese Labor government yet again displaying a complete and utter vacuum of moral clarity. Instead, Anthony Albanese and his cronies, led by the appalling Penny Wong, are sinking in a toxic moral sludge of moral confusion, identity politics, and yes, in my opinion, anti-Semitism. How else do you explain the fact, as we were discussing earlier, that the Labor government was perfectly prepared to release into the Australian community without first announcing any or preparing any safeguards convicted murderers, rapists and pedophiles who have not only committed offence against Australians, but in all likelihood, according to Peter Dutton, would offend again, putting Australian women and children at profound risk. This is one of them. He killed a female who was pregnant, he shot her, and then blew her body up with explosives. Albanese was quite happy to go gallivanting overseas with pop stars, knowing full well that this bloke was about to be released with a free roof over his head. Oh, and by the way, this outrageous decision came on the heels of Albanese's new appointment of the Chief of the High Court, regarded by some as the most left-wing High Court judge in 14 years. As Peter Dutton rightly pointed out, the single most important job of a Prime Minister is to keep the people of this nation safe. But where is Albanese? This matter has been on the books since June.
I think it is completely and utterly unconscionable that the Prime Minister has not been here to deal with this matter. The safety and security of the Australian population is the first charge of any leader of this country. And this Prime Minister is missing in action. I would have been happy to sit down with the Prime Minister at any time during the course of this week, overnight, this morning. Was he at the briefing? No, because he's on his plane to another overseas destination.
Yes, Anthony Albanese was quite happy to release into the Australian community some 84 individuals and potentially many, many more to come, who, as I said, included convicted murderers, rapists and pedophiles, highly likely to reoffend. While he, Anthony Albanese, headed off yet again overseas to take selfies with the glitterati, the pop stars and the presidents around the globe. Here he is hobnobbing at a conference featuring Gwen Stefani, heaven help us, Justin Trudeau, Kamala Harris and the Bidens. This is what is known as leadership Labor style, sucking up to the lefty woke elites. The only leadership we have seen this week, and indeed the only leadership we have seen in this country since the beginning of the year, is from Peter Dutton.
I would have been happy to sit down with him and negotiate a regime that we could pass by legislation that would see these people come back into detention, to see the threat that is imminent, to see the threat that is real to women and children in our country, dealt with and dispensed today. But the Prime Minister has taken a deliberate decision to abandon the Australian people when they most need him. When they most need him. And I think there are many Australians at the moment who are shaking their head in disbelief at a Prime Minister who has the opportunity to address this and has had the opportunity since June to address this so that these people would not have been released in the first place, and has chosen other priorities above the Australian public.
And what were those priorities of Mr Albanese's? The ridiculous voice referendum, which 2 out of every 3 Australians comprehensively rejected, and which caught Albo and his team, as it were, with their pants down. Out of touch and flat-footed and nothing but petulant excuses telling Australians we're all racists because of how we voted. Then it's straight off overseas for more selfies around the world. A Prime Minister in love with his own image as a globe-trotting summiteer, hobnobbing with the rich and famous. Even Leo DiCaprio doesn't get around as much as this bloke. Back at home, acting Prime Minister Richard Marles had to go scurrying off to Peter Dutton to work out how to fix the problem of the detainees being released. As Dennis Shanahan wrote in The Australian, quote, Peter Dutton is now running the political and legislative agenda from the opposition leader's office, while Anthony Albanese is overseas. In practical and political terms, the Albanese government has been caught with its pants down and handed leadership to Dutton because of its own failure to prepare for an adverse court decision and a complete misreading of the popular mood. End of quote from Dennis. Caught with your pants down once is bad enough, but twice? Oh, hang on, there's a third. Exactly a week ago at this time, live on Insiders, Penny Wong landed the Albanese in hot water again with her ignorant and ill-founded undergraduate comments about the Israelis, ceasefires and hospitals in Gaza, which drew the ire of Jewish organisations from around the world.
Israel should do everything it can to observe international humanitarian law. We have seen a harrowing number of civilians, including children, killed. This has to end. We are particularly concerned with what is happening with medical facilities.
Yet again, the only moral leadership on this issue we got was from Peter Dutton.
When people talk about Israel having to show restraint, it's completely and utterly the wrong time for that sort of language. It's a time to stand with the people of Israel to make sure that these women and children in particular are recovered from what is a very dire situation.
Peter Dutton also called for a national cabinet to deal with anti-Semitism in this country. That was ignored by Labor and the Greens. Here, by the way, is a sign on a wall. No, it's not Berlin in 1938, but it's Sydney in 2023. Clearly, we do have a problem with anti-Semitism in this country. And, may I tactfully opine, that problem is not entirely unlinked to large-scale immigration from certain strictly Islamic countries. But Labor simply refuses to acknowledge or treat anti-Semitism with the seriousness it deserves, equating it instead with the concept of Islamophobia. And Labor is bringing in 500,000 more people from overseas, the highest intake we've ever had. Well, John Howard disagrees, saying on Friday night at a visit to a synagogue that he is ashamed of the way the Jewish community has been treated in recent weeks, and that, quote, all decent Australians feel the same, share that shame. Well said, John. A Prime Minister who is not afraid to show moral leadership in his time, and still. And finally, allow me to also point to my friend Miranda Devine, who summed it up very simply this week in a tweet. Quote from Miranda, war is hell, but it really isn't hard to know which side to support. And it's not the one that bakes a baby alive in an oven, gang rapes women, and hacks an injured man's head off with a shovel. End of quote. Well said, Miranda. Certainly no lack of moral clarity there either. I simply say to Australians, the Albanese government has shown itself to be reckless on anti-Semitism, ignorant of the values of mainstream Australia, and incapable of moral leadership, devolving that role instead to Peter Dutton. The next election cannot come soon enough.